If you follow the headlines, the story seems simple enough. American farmers are in trouble. Again. You see the same images over and over: dusty fields, aging tractors, fifth-generation farmers standing in front of land their families have worked since the 1800s. You hear words like tariffs, trade wars, China, and bailouts. You're told this is another tragic chapter in the long American story of small family farms being crushed by forces beyond their control. And emotionally, that story works. It's supposed to. Because farming isn't just an industry in America. It's a myth. It's identity. It's moral capital. When farmers say they're hurting, politicians listen, media amplifies, and taxpayers brace themselves for another rescue package. But here's the uncomfortable truth: that story is incomplete at best, and misleading at worst. What's happening in American agriculture right now is real. The pain is real. The bankruptcies are real. The suicides, the closures, the hollowed-out rural towns, those are real too. But the mechanics of this crisis are very different from what most Americans think they're looking at. Farm bankruptcies are up, and that is true. In several states, filings have doubled year over year. Nationally, agricultural debt is pushing past $560 billion, a record high. Emergency aid over the last 8 years alone has exceeded $130 billion. Those numbers sound catastrophic. And they are, only if you stop there. But here's the part that almost never makes it into the conversation: bankruptcies are rising across the entire U.S. economy, not just on farms. Personal bankruptcies are up. Small business bankruptcies are up. Corporate restructurings are up. This isn't a uniquely agricultural phenomenon. It's what happens when high interest rates collide with heavy leverage across multiple sectors at the same time. Farms aren't immune to macroeconomics. They're just more visible when things go wrong. When most Americans hear the word bankruptcy, they picture total collapse. Losing everything. Selling the house. Starting over from scratch. That's not how it works for farmers. Farmers have access to a special form of bankruptcy protection called Chapter 12, designed specifically to keep farms operating. It allows debts to be restructured, payments paused, assets retained, and in many cases, land to be sold without capital gains tax. In other words, bankruptcy in agriculture is often not the end of the business. It's a tool for staying in business. That alone should change how we interpret the panic headlines. A rise in Chapter 12 filings does not automatically mean farms are disappearing. In many cases, it means farms are hitting reset under a legal framework that doesn't exist for most other Americans. Here's another number that gets repeated constantly: 86% of U.S. farms are small family farms. Technically true. Practically meaningless. Under USDA definitions, a small farm can earn as little as $1,000 per year and still count. Christmas tree lots. Hobby farms. Market gardens. Side operations run by people with full-time professional careers elsewhere. All of those get lumped together with working farms that actually produce food at scale. When you strip that away, the picture changes fast. Those small farms collectively control only about 40% of farmland and produce less than 20% of total output. The majority of American food production comes from large, capital-intensive family operations that look a lot more like corporations than pastoral nostalgia. And increasingly, farmland itself is being consolidated into institutional hands, investment firms, private equity, pension funds, because farmland has become a financial asset class. Which brings us to a key contradiction. One of the strangest features of modern American farming is this: many farmers make more money from owning land than from farming it. According to USDA data, average cropland values have been rising faster than crop revenues. In some regions, land values increased by $270 per acre in a single year, while crop revenues averaged closer to $200 per acre before costs. That means a farmer can technically be losing money on production while getting richer on paper as land prices climb. This creates a perverse incentive structure. Farms survive not because agriculture is profitable, but because land appreciation masks operational losses. And when debt rises, as it has with higher interest rates, that illusion cracks. Yes, Tariffs matter. Yes, China shifting soybean purchases to Brazil matters. Roughly 20% of U.S. agricultural output is exported, and losing a major buyer is devastating. But the idea that this crisis began with tariffs is simply wrong. This system was fragile long before trade wars made it worse. Harvest decisions are made months or years in advance. Input costs, seed, fertilizer, machinery, have risen dramatically over decades due to consolidation among suppliers. Meanwhile, farmers remain price takers on the selling side, squeezed by a handful of global grain traders who control the majority of the market. Farmers can't raise prices when costs rise. They don't have that power. Which means when shocks hit, trade wars, labor shortages, frozen government programs, the pain is immediate and brutal. We have to talk about why bailouts don't fix this, why consolidation accelerates because of crises, why political narratives around farming are so effective, and why the system keeps recreating the same disaster, over and over again. Let's start with the most politically sensitive piece, government aid. Since 2018, U.S. farmers have received well over $130 billion in direct federal support through trade mitigation payments, emergency relief, pandemic programs, and ad hoc disaster aid. In some recent years, government payments made up 30 to 40% of net farm income nationwide. That sounds like help. And on an individual level, it often is. But structurally, it does something deeply counterproductive. Bailouts do not stabilize farming. They stabilize land prices. When income drops, subsidies step in. When subsidies step in, lenders stay confident. When lenders stay confident, debt continues to flow. And when debt continues to flow, land prices remain elevated. The result is a system where farms survive not because production is profitable, but because government support props up asset values long enough to roll the debt forward. That keeps farmers operating, but it also locks new farmers out, concentrates ownership, and ensures the next downturn will be even more painful. Aid delays collapse. It doesn't fix fragility. Every agricultural crisis produces the same winner. Not the small farmer. Not the rural community. Not even the average large operator. The winner is consolidation. When margins compress and interest rates rise, farms don't fail evenly. The most leveraged, least diversified operations break first. Their land doesn't disappear. It gets bought, often by neighbors who are already larger, or by investors who don't farm at all. Over the past 40 years, the number of U.S. farms has declined steadily, while the average farm size has grown. A small percentage of farms now control the majority of production, capital, and political influence. This isn't an accident. It's how capital-intensive systems behave under stress. Crises are not interruptions to consolidation. They are the mechanism. On one side, farmers buy inputs from increasingly concentrated suppliers. Seed, fertilizer, chemicals, machinery, industries dominated by a handful of global firms. Prices rise. Choices shrink. Switching costs explode. On the other side, farmers sell into markets controlled by equally concentrated buyers. A small number of grain traders, processors, and distributors set terms. Farmers don't get to negotiate prices, rather, they are being forced to accept whatever price being given. That means farmers absorb volatility while corporations absorb margins. This is why work harder doesn't solve anything. This is why better management isn't enough. Farmers are trapped in the middle of two oligopolies, carrying the risk while others capture the cream. Politicians love farmers because farmers symbolize independence, self-reliance, hard work, moral clarity. That symbolism is powerful and dangerously misleading. Modern farming is one of the most financialized industries in the country. It depends on credit markets, futures contracts, insurance programs, federal payments, and global trade flows. There is nothing wrong with that. But pretending farmers are outside the system prevents honest reform inside the system. As long as the story is rugged individuals under attack, the response will always be temporary relief instead of structural change. And temporary relief always favors those already large enough to survive long enough to consolidate more land. Everyone says we need the next generation of farmers. Then we make it almost impossible for them to exist. Land prices are high. Debt loads are enormous. Profit margins are thin. Access to capital is constrained unless you already have collateral, which usually means inherited land. The average age of American farmers is now nearly 60 years old. That's not because young people don't care about farming. It's because the system rewards ownership, not production. You don't get paid for growing food efficiently. You get paid for controlling land in a subsidized system. That is not a labor shortage problem, but a structural exclusion problem. Here's the shift that rarely gets said out loud. American agriculture is slowly transitioning from a producer economy to a landholding economy. Food production becomes secondary. Asset control becomes primary. That's why institutional investors are comfortable buying farmland even when farm income is volatile. They're not betting on crops. They're betting on scarcity, subsidies, and political protection. And as that shift continues, farming becomes less about feeding people and more about managing balance sheets. Why this crisis won't end? It will only become the new normal. Here is the hardest truth. There is no return to a stable, broadly prosperous farming middle class under the current structure. The cycle, debt, volatility, bailout, consolidation, will continue because each phase reinforces the next. The system is doing what it was redesigned to do. The only question is whether Americans are willing to stop mistaking survival for success. The American farm crisis isn't a failure of farmers. It's a success of a system that treats land as an asset, risk as transferable, and food as an afterthought. As long as we keep telling a sentimental story about who farming is for, we will keep funding a reality that pushes actual farmers out. Not with a collapse, but with a quiet, legal, financially efficient disappearance. And by the time we notice what's gone, the land will still be there, and just owned by someone else.